Canadian winter has a way of reshaping the world the moment temperatures drop. What appears, at first glance, to be an ordinary North American winter reveals itself as something far more dramatic. Streets continue filling with people long after the cold settles in, and routines unfold as if the landscape weren't frozen in place. For many Americans, this becomes the first quiet shock. Winter here is not an interruption. It is a season that Canadians move through with a certain calm defiance, a kind of everyday resilience that can look almost unbelievable from the outside. What stands out first is the atmosphere that winter creates. Snow doesn't simply fall. It transforms neighborhoods into pale, muffled worlds where distant sounds disappear, and even busy streets seem slowed by an invisible weight. Yet Canadians step into this environment with a steadiness that feels almost ritualistic. Families bundle children into layers that seem architectural. Commuters stride across icy sidewalks with a practiced confidence, and in the middle of it all, life flows with a rhythm that Americans often call crazy only because it contradicts everything they associate with extreme cold. Layering becomes an art form rather than a hassle. Streets fill with residents dressed in insulated coats rated for temperatures Americans rarely imagine. Boots are chosen not for style, but durability. Gloves, scarves, balaclavas, and thermal underlayers are arranged with a precision that comes only from necessity. And while visitors may see these winter outfits as survival gear, Canadians treat them like everyday uniform stores that protect rather than limit. Then come the habits that seem almost cinematic. Children playing outside during temperatures that would lead many American schools to close entirely. Parents chatting on driveways while breath turns to frost in the air. Joggers weaving through snowbanks at dawn. Undeterred by the biting cold, sidewalks echo with the steady scrape of shovels as neighbors clear paths before work, often helping one another without discussion or fanfare. In many towns, entire communities appear outside after a heavy snowfall, if following an unwritten code that winter maintenance belongs to everyone. Americans often pause at the sight of drivers plugging in block heaters, a practice almost unknown south of the border. Parked cars lined with dangling cords resemble a strange winter ritual. Yet the logic behind it is simple. Engines need warmth to wake in the harshest months. The normalization of this routine performed in frigid darkness before morning commute reveals the quiet practicality woven through Canada's winter culture. Daily life continues, even when temperatures plunge to levels Americans consider dangerous. Buses run, schools remain open, residents walk dogs along frozen sidewalks. This persistence is not reckless enthusiasm. It is a refined understanding of cold, shaped by generations who learn to coexist with a climate that shows no softness. Far from pushing against nature, Canadians adapt to it with a mindset that blends caution, acceptance, and an almost stoic humor. For many Americans observing this for the first time, the shock isn't the cold itself. It's the way Canadians treat winter not as a barrier, but as a familiar companion. Challenge, yes, but never discouraging. And in that interaction, something deeper starts to reveal itself, a national relationship with climate that has shaped not only habits, but character. As winter deepens, the cultural contrasts become clearer. Many Americans describe a sense of awe at how seamlessly Canadians fold the season into their routines. It shows in the way people move carefully, but without hesitation, and in the way neighborhoods adapt with rituals that mark the passing months. Snow tires, once considered optional luxuries in much of the United States, become essential. Drivers change them with the same inevitability as an annual medical checkup, not out of fear, but out of respect for conditions that demand preparation. Even social behavior shifts with the weather. Winter in Canada draws communities closer rather than pushing them indoors. Small gestures, holding a door longer for someone weighed down by snow gear, brushing off a stranger's car windshield, or offering a neighbor de-icing salt curry, a quiet significance. These are habits formed not through instruction, but through an understanding that survival and comfort improve when responsibility is shared. The cold softens the edges of social interaction, making politeness feel less like courtesy and more like instinct. Public spaces reflect the same mentality. Skating rinks appear in local parks, not as weekend attractions, but as everyday gathering places. Trails fill with walkers, whose steps leave temporary patterns in freshly fallen snow. Even the early darkness seems to encourage togetherness. Homes glow warmly from within. Streetlights cast halos across frozen roads, and communities settle into a season defined as much by atmosphere as temperature. For Americans, accustomed to winter as a time of retreat, this outward rhythm can seem almost surreal. Typical situations reveal how deeply winter shapes behavior. Bus stops hold quiet lines of residents whose faces are wrapped in scarves, their posture relaxed even as the wind cuts sharply across open spaces. Grocery store entrances transform into small ecosystems of melting snow and parked shovels. Workplaces accumulate spare gloves and emergency kits, not as corporate policy, but because someone thought it might help. In many places, the first heavy storm is met not with frustration, but with a kind of resigned humor and understanding that complaining doesn't bring warmth, but laughter makes the cold more bearable. Then there is the Canadian habit of continuing outdoor activities long after Americans would declare the season closed. It's common to see families hiking through snowy forests, skating on frozen ponds, or gathering around backyard fire pits while temperatures drop below zero. None of it is done for spectacle. It is simply a cultural rhythm that refuses to let the climate dictate joy. Winter becomes less a challenge to endure and more a backdrop for ordinary life. Gradually, these habits begin revealing the cultural foundations beneath them. Canadians often display a steady patience, shaped by years of navigating unpredictable weather. The climate demands planning, resilience, and a willingness to adapt quickly. But it also encourages modestino. One defeats winter. They simply learn to work with it. This practicality seeps into emotional landscapes as well. People grow comfortable with discomfort, embracing a kind of quiet endurance that surprises many outsiders. For Americans witnessing this shift, the effect can be transformative. The idea that life continues fully, even beautifully, in harsh conditions challenges assumptions about comfort, convenience, and limits. Although the cold may feel overwhelming at first, the people who move through it demonstrate a collective mindset formed by experience rather than bravado, and that mindset begins to illuminate something deeper about how Canadians see themselves, not as conquerors of winter, but as participants in a seasonal dialogue that shapes everyday behavior, values, and relationships over time. These winter habits form more than a seasonal routine. They create a cultural identity rooted in steadiness. Many Americans notice that the cold teaches a particular kind of emotional discipline. There is less dramatizing of inconvenience, fewer heated reactions to setbacks, and a general acceptance that certain forces can't be controlled. Snowstorms delay plans. Ice disrupts mornings. Temperatures drop without warning, yet life proceeds with a calm that feels almost philosophical. This quiet resilience reshapes expectations, softening the urgency that often defines American lifestyles. In this environment, people learn to anticipate rather than react. Winter driving becomes a lesson in patience. Commuters leave earlier, conversations slow, plans become flexible, and in this shift, Americans often discover an unexpected clarity and understanding that winter isn't an obstacle, but a teacher. The weather rewards preparation, consistency, and cooperation, values that gradually work their way into daily choices. Over time, many find themselves adopting the same habits they once found astonishing, checking road conditions instinctively, layering without thought, and moving through storms with a composed practicality that once seemed foreign. Emotionally, the transformation is subtle but significant. The season encourages people to value warmth, not just physical warmth, but the comfort found in community and shared experience. Neighbors greeting one another on early, snow-covered mornings, colleagues exchanging small survival tips, families creating rituals that make the dark months feel intimate. rather than isolating. These patterns reveal a cultural truth at the heart of Canadian winter life. Resilience grows stronger when it is shared. By the end of their first winter, many Americans realize that what once looked crazy now feels almost natural. The cold loses its intimidation, replaced by a sense of mutual understanding between people and place. Winter becomes a reminder that humans adapt not by resisting their environment, but by learning its rhythm. And within that rhythm, there is a certain beauty, a quiet proof that even the harsher seasons can foster connection, patience, and a deeper appreciation for the small, steady comforts that carry people through.